Hi, I'm Starhawk. I'm a writer and author. Some of my books are there in the back, including my new one called The Empowerment Manual, which is about working in horizontal collaborative groups. I've been involved in political and social movements since the 60s, from the anti-war through the feminist movement, earth-based spirituality, many anti-war movements, actually. I keep cycling over and over again. And many years in the anti-globalization, or I prefer to call it global justice movement. I do a lot of training in nonviolent direct action and have worked in groups that both have a commitment to strategic nonviolence and a framework of diversity of tactics. So really glad to be here tonight, glad we're having this dialogue. Well, I'm so happy we're actually having this discussion and this debate, and for me, that's one of the reasons that I'm reluctant to accept a framework of diversity of tactics, because my experience being involved with the anti-globalization movement, which I actually prefer to call the global justice movement, for something like 10 years, was that once we accepted diversity of tactics, we actually stopped discussing both tactics and strategy. And for me, one of the most important words in a framework of strategic nonviolence is strategy, which I don't think we have. Right? If we have a strategy, then we can figure out what tactics make sense. In that way, I think we do certainly need a diversity of tactics. But when diversity of tactics becomes a code word for anything goes, let's not talk about it because we just don't want to tell anyone what to do, which I don't think is what any of you are advocating here, but has been the way it kind of seemed to come down a lot in the movements I've been in, then I think we lose intelligence and we lose that ability to actually confront each other, challenge each other, and tangle with these issues, which are complex and not easy to resolve. For me, I think the strategy has to begin by recognizing that violence is endemic in the system we live in. Poverty is a form of violence. Racism, gender violence, all of those things are immense forms of violence that do untold harm, cause untold suffering to people every single day of their lives. But they're also hidden. When you say violence, you know, if you say to someone who's a violent person, they might picture an anarchist in a black mask, you know, with the bomb, or they might picture someone of a different race with a gun, but they very rarely picture a white man in a business suit who's probably making the decisions which are causing far more suffering than anybody else. So the strategy of nonviolent resistance, and what we sometimes call the people power strategy, is that we make the hidden violence in the system visible by contesting it. That the system can continue to inflict that violence because in some sense we all consent to it, we all comply with it. We often feel like we don't have a choice, we might not see the choices we have, but our lives are so entwined with it that to eat and to feed our kids and to pursue our goals, we do what the system requires of us. And when we stop doing that, when we withdraw consent, then oftentimes the system responds with that violence, which then becomes visible. When the system has to use violence to maintain itself, it's very costly. It's costly to the system in terms of money, in terms of effort, in terms of energy, and also in terms of legitimacy. And I would say our strategy is not about asking for our legitimacy. I agree, we don't need to do that. Our strategy is to make visible the illegitimacy of the system that we're in and make that clear to people. I think our strategy is also in the Occupy movement right now to build as broad a movement as is conceivably possible. And in that, we have in some ways done an amazing job, And in other ways, as you can see, we are just at the very beginnings of figuring out how to actually bring together that 99%. Kazo in one of our emails said the trick right now is not about bringing down the 1%. I think they're actually doing a good job of that themselves. It's how to unify the 99%. So in that, I think a strategic nonviolence, again, right now for the Occupy movement, not necessarily all the time, everywhere, under any circumstances, for every social movement or revolution everywhere, but right now for the Occupy movement is a nonviolent strategic resistance, because that way we make the illegitimacy of the system much, much clearer. We also make clearer to people what we're going to do when we get together, so that people have a choice, they're empowered. If I know what's going to happen in an action, I can make a choice about whether I want to participate. If I go to an action thinking that we have agreements and people start doing stuff that I didn't sign on for, then I'm disempowered and I don't have a choice. And I don't think we build a movement by disempowering people. I think we build a movement by empowering people, giving them choices and giving them radical choices that encourage them to step out of their comfort zone and do something that they have never done before. And I think that has been one of the great strengths of the Occupy movement, that so many people have come into it who have never been activists before. It's also one of the huge challenges. You know, I've sometimes said it's a movement composed really of raving drunks and former student body presidents, right? Right? It has a spread of, you know, immense, like, different cultures, different challenges. Trying to figure out how to get us all to work together, I think, is a major challenge for us right now. So having agreements, keeping to those agreements, and having these discussions, I think, is part of how we build that movement.